Hey everyone, it's Matt here with Nightrun Studio, and so far we've got things set up so our quest log is more or less functional. We can get a printout of our current progress, but let's be honest, a debug log isn't going to cut it. In this video then, we're going to create the UI for our quest details menu. Let's get started. So first off, I'm just going to click on our quest log in order to zoom out, and I'll turn on my gizmo so we can kind of see what we're working with here. I'm then just going to create an empty game object, which we'll call quest details. As with most of our UI objects, we're just going to click on the rect transform and stretch in all four directions by holding down Option or Alt on PC. We'll then just provide some margins around the outside. If I turn off my gizmos, you can kind of get a bit of an idea here for just how large this will be. The only other thing we need to do on this object is add a canvas group, which will just allow us to control the alpha and also interactableness of all the objects that are going to be children of this. At this point, we can add a new UI image, which is going to be the main page graphic. I'm going to be using banner connection right from the Tiny Swords asset pack, and again, I'm just going to stretch this in all directions. As with all of our objects in this, we're going to be slicing it, and I'm going to go with a pixels per unit of about 0.5. I did go over how to 9 slice in the previous episode, but just as a quick recap, it just means dragging in these green nodes so that the inside is what gets stretched and everything on the outside keeps its aspect ratio. We'll just add some margins to get that to about the right size, and then right-click on Quest Details in order to add our next image. This one will be our Quest Detail ribbon, which is just going to hold our title. Here we'll use the ribbon red 3 slides, again slicing it with 0.5 pixels per unit. We're going to stretch it, this time just side to side though, not in all 4 directions, and then provide some margins. Now once we're all done, we'll actually move the quest details above quest log here in the hierarchy so that it nests nicely in behind it. However, for now we're just going to keep it where it is so we can see exactly what we're working with. Next, we'll click on that quest details ribbon and add a UI text mesh pro. Here I'm just going to type quest name as a placeholder. We're going to use the bangers font. I'm going to go with a size of about 72, make it so that it's black, and I'm also going to auto size, which just means that it will change the size of the text to fit the space, so if you have a long quest title, it'll still fit. We'll then just center everything. Now we'll go up to our rect transform, stretch it in all directions, and once again, add some margins. That'll do it for our title. We can now go to our quest details, add yet another image. This one is actually just going to be our backing. This is purely visual, but it'll just give a nice background for where we have our quest description and objectives. Once again, I'll slice it 2.5 pixels per unit, and as usual, we'll stretch it in all 4 directions and add some margins. I'm actually just going to adjust that one a tiny bit so that the left side sort of will disappear behind the quest log once we rearrange them. Now ultimately, we're going to have 2 objects under here, one for the description of the quest and another for its objectives. So I'm going to add a vertical layout group which will allow us to control how those different objects display on screen. We won't do anything with that for now though. Let's go ahead and right click on the backing, add some text mesh pro, and the first will be our quest description. I'll just put some placeholder text in here for now. I'll switch this to bangers, and this time I'm going to use the drop shadow preset. The only difference here is that this has an outline of about 0.3, and it is a black outline, even though it looks white here just this moment. This time I'm actually going to leave it anchored to the top left and just give it some width and height values. Don't worry about the fact that it's off to the side a little bit here right now. We'll fix that later on with our vertical layout group. With that done, we can add our next object, though this time is going to be just a little different as we don't actually want to add Text Mesh Pro right away. Some quests will have multiple objectives, and so we're going to actually create slots for each objective so that we can customize it a little more easily later on. So for now, we're just going to create an empty game object, which will be our quest objectives. Once again, we'll leave that anchored to the top left, give it some width and height values, and then we're going to add a grid layout group, which will help us control the objective slots once we put them in here. Each of these slots will have 2 Text Mesh Pro objects, one for the description, sort of like a collect 3 mushrooms, and the other to actually show your progress, 2 out of 3. So let's go ahead and create an empty game object here, which will be the quest objective slot, and we'll add a horizontal layout group to this, which will let us control the 2 Text Mesh Pros we're going to put on it. We'll then click on the slot itself, add a Text Mesh Pro object. I'm just going to put some placeholder text here. Once again, we'll select bangers and use the drop shadow. We'll just put some values into our rect transform here. Then I'm actually just going to copy and paste this exact object, give it a new name for our tracking text, put in some new placeholder text, and align this one over to the right. Now we're almost set there, except that this one doesn't need to be as large as it's just going to display a fraction, and so we can pick some slightly smaller numbers. With that done, we're just gonna make this slot into a prefab by dragging it down into our prefabs folder. At that point, then we can duplicate it, and it'll look like a real mess for now, but don't worry, we'll fix that in just a second. We come up to our quest objectives here, we can now work with that grid layout group in order to set some sizes. We'll start by setting a nice large cell size here of about 500 by 35, and already that's looking a whole lot better. I will also just set the alignment here to upper center, as that'll help keep it aligned nicely. And then if we go back up to our backing, we can now use our vertical layout group. Here we're just gonna add a little bit of padding, which will move all of our text out into the center of the menu so that it looks nice. At this point, I just wanna make one small adjustment going into my quest description, and I'm just gonna change the height a tiny bit so that everything fits onto this backing a little more nicely. Next up, we're gonna make some UI for our rewards. So let's add a UI image, we'll call it rewards. And here we're just gonna use the button blue 3 slides. This is gonna be the one time where I keep it at 1 pixel per unit, just so that it's not quite so chunky looking. And then we're gonna stretch in all directions and add a bunch of margins. This is just gonna be the object that holds the slots showing each of the different rewards for each quest. Next, we wanna actually add some slots to show the rewards. We'll just make an empty object called reward slots that will be the holder for each of those. We're gonna stretch this one, and then I'll also add some margins. Don't worry that it's a little off center for now, as we're gonna need that when we add the slots in just a moment. We're gonna add a grid layout group to our reward slots, and then underneath it we'll get started making the prefab for the actual slot itself. For now, this will just be an empty game object called reward slot. We're gonna add a horizontal layout group to this, which is just gonna be what controls the image as well as the text showing the quantity of each reward. We'll then add a image called reward image, and here I'm just gonna add some gold to start us off. This part will really vary depending on how you've set up your images, but for me, if I scale it up to 2 and 2 on the X and Y, it fills the space pretty nicely. I'm also just gonna set my pivot to a 1 on the X, and it's sitting at about where I want it to. Next, I'm gonna add a UI Text Mesh Pro onto the reward slot. Just set it with 99 as the placeholder text, then we'll go bangers and use drop shadow one more time. Don't worry about the fact that that's a bit of a mess. We'll head up to our reward slots and set up our grid layout group. I'm just gonna create our cell size, and then I'm also gonna add a little bit of negative padding so that this sucks up over to the left side just a little. I'm also gonna set it so that this is upper center so that the rewards center themselves, so when there's not that many, they'll appear in the middle. With that done, we'll go to our reward slot, and now we can use the horizontal layout group. I'm gonna do a negative spacing, which will just bring the numbers so they overlap with the image a little bit. I'm also gonna set it so that it controls the size of the child and forces the child to expand if necessary. That gets things almost looking right, except my quantity text isn't quite fitting. I'm just gonna move it down to 32 so that it fits within the box. I notice that my image is a little bit stretched here, so I'm just gonna click on it and preserve aspect so that it keeps it looking the way it's supposed to. I'm then just gonna go back up to the reward slot itself, and we're just gonna add a little more negative spacing to bring that quantity text in a little closer. Sorry about this reward slot was a real pain. Next, I'm gonna go to the reward slot's empty object and just get my numbers so that they are displaying exactly the way I want them to. There we go. I'll just make that reward slot into a prefab by dragging it down here, and then we can duplicate it. And there we go, that looks pretty nicely, and we can hold up to 6 different rewards. I'm also just gonna add some text as a header here, so clicking on rewards, I'm gonna add Text Mesh Pro. I'm gonna type in rewards here. Once again, I'll use bangers, drop shadow, play with my size and settings so that it gets just right, and we can center it right over the box here. We are now almost finished this very long UI video. However, I'm just gonna quickly drag my quest details up top here so that it nests nicely in behind the quest log. And now we're gonna add our final section, which is going to be an empty object called options. Once again, we're gonna stretch this out in all directions and then just add some margins. And essentially this is gonna be where we put the options when a quest is offered to us, like accept, decline, or when we want to complete a quest. I'm going to add a rect masked 2D here, which is going to make it so that the ribbons are only visible when they are inside of this shape. That way we can slide them in and out, but have them not overlap with the quest menu itself. I'll show you how that works in just a moment. At this point, we can go ahead and add a UI button here. We're going to call this first one accept, and I'm just going to be using the ribbon red connection left. We'll slice this at 0.5 pixels per unit. I'm gonna keep it anchored to the top left and then just give it some values for both position as well as size. If I move it around now, you can see how the rect mask hides it when it goes behind the quest description menu, and that'll make for some nice opportunities for animating later on. Now just gonna go to our Text Mesh Pro here underneath, call it text, and I'll just type in accept here. I'm gonna be using bangers. I'm gonna go with drop shadow, a size of 72. Add some margin so that we can get it looking just the way we want it to. Just gonna add a canvas group to this so that again, we can control when it's interactable or not, as well as when it's transparent. Finally, we'll make a duplicate of this one. I'll call it decline, and I'll just move that into place. Change my Text Mesh Pro text so that it also says decline. And finally, we'll copy it one last time, call this one complete, change our Text Mesh Pro to say the same, move it into place. And this one I'm gonna make just a little bit smaller as the word just doesn't fit. We'll then move it into place. And with that done, we now have our quest description menu fully done and looking pretty decent. In the next video, we'll actually wire it up so that all the data populates on its own. However, this video is already getting long, so I'll see you in that one. Hope to see you then. Until then, this is Matt with Nightrun Studio. Cheers.